We shouldn't really be surprised that it's culminated with this bogus trial of unintended trumped up charges they have levied against him. I think it just goes to show and affirms a lot about the current state of the American political system, is that it doesn't serve the American people. It serves entrenched powers who obviously don't want Donald Trump in power just because he's a disrupting force to their liberal order, which is really just falling apart in real time, and we're witnessing that transition.
We don't have 6 months to talk about the Trump conviction because July 11th is going to be here before you know it. Will he go to jail is one of the big questions on our mind, but a lot of people are asking the question, is this signaling a dark day in history? Is the DOJ so corrupt at this point that it's only the preferred weapon of choice to punish one's enemies? And if Trump gets elected, will he do the same? Will the DOJ even listen to him? There's lots of questions to ask.
By the way, my name is Joe McClain. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
We're having a conversation with Michael Ippolito, who, by the way, is the co-founder and president of the American Post Liberal, and Nicholas Swanson, who is a doctoral student in economics at George Mason University. And their article enshrining abortion via IVF over crisis is worth the read, crisismagazine.com. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes for you, of course. Let me ask you, let's talk about Donald Trump for a moment, because the whole world is reacting to this. First time in history of an American president being convicted of a felony, although there once was a vice president who committed treason and actually had to run for his life. That's an interesting story. But nonetheless, so what do you think about the conviction of Donald Trump? Do you think he should drop out after having been convicted? Do you think he's going to go to prison? But more importantly, is he truly the conservative candidate that Catholics deserve and America should get? What do you think? Michael Ippolito, start with you.
Well, obviously, May 30th, 2024 is going to go down a date that will live in infamy. And I really don't think we should be surprised about what happened to the former president. Ever since 2015, he's been persecuted by the establishment, whether it be from the fake hoaxes about him in Russia, whether it be the first impeachment, whether it be a lot of the controversies in the 2020 election and the suppression of stories about his political opponents, the second impeachment, the raid against his Mar-a-Lago house in 2022. We shouldn't really be surprised that it's culminated in this, with this bogus trial of pun intended trumped up charges that they have levied against him. And I think it just goes to show and affirms a lot about the current state of the American political system, is that it doesn't serve the American people. It serves entrenched powers who obviously don't want Donald Trump in power just because he's a disrupting force to their operation, to their liberal order, which is really just falling apart in real time. And we're witnessing that transition. And whether we like it or not, Donald Trump is this world historic figure now. And he obviously is going against people who are against Christianity, who are against Catholicism in particular. Remember, it was Biden's FBI that was spying on traditional Catholics. So he's obviously up against that. And I really do think, just given the American political situation and the American political system, that he's the best shot for change. But to the point of him being the most moral candidate, compared to his opponents, he is, but from the Catholic perspective, he's not. And that's very hard for faithful Catholics. But I do believe that it is the best shot for a better alternative, a better future, I should say, because the people that are running against the alternatives are Joe Biden, right? Devout Catholic, who's pro-abortion, pro-homosexuality. He's probably pro-IVF too. So at least with Donald Trump, you can get some actual pro-life policies. There's just a major contradiction. And then RFK Jr., who's also a Catholic and devout, or I don't know if he really practices. He doesn't really use it as like Joe Biden does, but he still supports abortion. And he's been more squishy on the social issues. So really, Donald Trump is the only candidate who could possibly fix the country. I mean, I say possibly because the country's not going to be fixed by just winning another election. There is a deeper religious problem, and there's a deeper social problem. There's a deeper spiritual problem that I don't think Donald Trump can fix. I think it's going to take at least a couple generations to fix. But at least if we can get Trump elected, it's a good start. Will he go to prison? I don't know. It seems likely that he will, but who knows what will happen. I pray that nothing worse happens to him, but I think the support that we're seeing for him is a good sign. But I just worry that something else might happen. But I think that the best thing we could do is support the former president and his endeavors.
Nicholas, what about you? It seems that President Trump embraces IVF, contraception. He has a compromise on abortion that seems to be different than his first term. He definitely embraces homosexual marriage and has no intention of defending marriage between a man and a woman. I think Catholics deserve better ultimately than either of the choices that we're given, or if you want to put RFK in there, than any of those three choices. I think we deserve better and need more. What say you?
I think you're exactly right. I mean, look, President Biden's positions are not in line with the Catholic Church. I mean, I'll quote Cardinal Gregory in saying that he's a cafeteria Catholic, which I thought was quite a bold statement to hear. But when it comes to Trump, I'm not sure that the battle in the end is going to be won with Trump or even lost with Trump. I think from a broader view, we as social conservatives, as Catholics who believe in the teachings of the church on life, on marriage, we need to demand more in general from our politicians, from these people who call themselves pro-life. We need to ask that they actually make a substantive case for these issues. There was an article a couple of years ago in the Wall Street Journal by Ryan T. Anderson. Some of your listeners might be familiar. He's a Catholic social thinker. He's done a lot on gender and marriage, defending the church's views. And he said in this article that I think the title of it was "Religious Liberty is Not Enough." It's like we've gone from debating our actual views on marriage and on life to just saying, leave us alone. And we have to do more than that. It's like, yes, should a baker be forced to bake a cake for a wedding that goes against his Christian views? Absolutely not. But we also need to make the case for our views on marriage and on life. And, two avenues I would point to is to a culture that's very secular. One is to look to the social science, because the social science backs us up in a lot of these cases. I don't think that it's normative. It's not going to tell you what you should do morally, but it bolsters our case in many situations. And then the other thing I would suggest is sort of point to the victims here. I mean, I think our side has done a good job when it comes to this issue of transgenderism, pointing to the victims, which are these children who have had these procedures done at very young ages. But when it comes to abortion, point to the unborn children, who are nameless. Point to the men and women that regret their abortions, who have repented and who are sorry, and the anguish that they've experienced. Because we have to just, whether it's Trump or it's Cruz or we have to stop just making the case of, leave us alone. We have to do better than that. And I think that's what we should demand from Trump and from others.
Michael, do you think it's possible to win over people like Ted Cruz, for instance, these so-called conservatives, or Mike Johnson, or any of them, to a moral high ground that we think that they ought to be embracing by default but aren't?
Oh, I definitely do think it is possible to win them over, because despite this massive contradiction, they do believe in God and the Christian God. They believe in Jesus, but they're just trapped in this framework, and they're also just scared politically. And as Nicholas said, we need to demand more from our politicians. Them just being cowardly is not enough. They need to articulate a Christian worldview that serves the common good and serves the American people, and most importantly, protects those who can't protect themselves.
I've invited our good friend of the program, Michael Koeniger, to be on the show. I mean, you got to ask the question, is it this bad? I mean, when I think about, like, say, the corruption of the Department of Justice, I'm like, it's called a Tuesday. What are we talking about here? It seems like Well, like we all knew that people are biased. We all know that one tries to get exact vengeance on one's enemy. That's not new. So, is this as bad as we purported to be?
Well, that depends, Joe, and it depends, unfortunately, on which side of the political spectrum you fall on. And as a Catholic man, where do we fall on that spectrum? Because we're real conservatives, conserving something that we believe in, but the side that calls themselves the conservatives is not conserving anything, as you've pointed out repeatedly. The question becomes, is it a dark day? For half of America, absolutely, it's a dark day. There's no doubt. For the other half of America, they've been vindicated. He's a crook. They know he's a crook. It's now proven that he's a crook, and now they can campaign on the fact that he's a convicted criminal. And that rhetoric we're going to hear from now until November ad nauseum. It'll be awful. And I went to a site called All Sides, and it tries to show you the right side, the left side, and the middle side of the discussion. And on all sides, I read a lot of those left-leaning articles, and they think it's a great day for America. The justice system works, et cetera, et cetera. And what's interesting about that to me, Joe, is Brent and I talked about, I was guest hosting for you when this trial started, and Brent and I talked about this trial first week. And there were so many problems with the way this was prosecuted, where the statute of limitations had run out. Trump has never been convicted of a felony, so it was a misdemeanor charge. It was a bookkeeping error. And, of course, they threw all that out the window and went ahead and prosecuted and won. And then real quickly, Joe, the last comment I have that just comes right to the top of my head, I read a few articles by legal scholars who said this was just a poor defense. Instead of going after the facts of the case and destroying the facts of the case, they went after Stormy Daniels and that whole story because they wanted to prove that Trump had not had a relationship with that woman. And while that's important to him as a moral character, it was unimportant in light of the case. And I found that to be very interesting.
You know what I find interesting is in order to get past that statute of limitations, Alvin Bragg had to take as you say, the misdemeanor charge and creatively bump that up to felony, which gave him the opportunity to bring that to court past the statute of limitations. So the business record issue is like a non-issue, really. Like nobody gets really convicted of that truly. Right. So paying an attorney, whether it's to keep a person quiet or not, is beside the point. That's not really what he's been convicted of here. Alvin Bragg needed to find a creative solution. So what does he do? He says he changed these business records. He falsified business records in order to cover up a second crime. What's the second crime? It's not Stormy Daniels. The second crime is election interfering in the 2016 election. So isn't it ironic that Donald Trump gets convicted of rigging an election? I mean, of all people, to be accused of rigging an election, I just find that so ironic. It's just, if it wasn't more serious, it would be laughable. Like, seriously, like this is the country we live in. They get him on election interfering at the end of the day. So here's the question. Do you think we're going to see Donald Trump in a jumpsuit come July the 11th?
I don't think he's going to jail, Joe. I think that he'll have his lawyers hit the courts hard. He'll probably put in an appeal directly to the Supreme Court. I don't think he's going to end up in jail. I think everyone realizes this was a bookkeeping error, and while they connected it to a so-called felony that he was never convicted of, I think it'll go away. But honestly, Joe, I don't think it matters. I think that if Trump's campaign does the right thing, this is going to make him more likable and not less. Guys like me, I've been very unhappy with Trump. He's pro-choice. He believes in abortion, the murder of babies. He's all for IVF. He's all for homosexual marriage. He's all for issues that you and I are very close to our heart. But this makes me kind of want to vote for him too, Joe, because he's a victim, right? He's the guy that the machine went after.
It would seem you're not alone, because more women voters, younger voters, more minority voters than ever before seem to be coming out of the woodwork to sound their support. In fact, Donald Trump received a $100 million donation, not from his longtime friend and billionaire, But now Democrat billionaires are considering coming out in support of Donald Trump. I was seeing some articles coming out from over the weekend. Bill Ackman, this was from the Daily Wire reporting this, longtime Democrat likely to back Trump over Biden. I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now. Is he doesn't just have the base or the MAGA nation. Now he's seeing that middle ground. However, the polls seem to be conflicted here. They're kind of the polls that have come out since the conviction last week seem to point the country to like in a split 50-50 when it comes to independent voters. Half are saying they think he should go to jail. Half are saying that he should jump out of the election. But the other half is saying, no, he should stay the course. And we're seeing a bump from the middle ground voters towards Donald Trump. Is that a signal of what we can expect come November? Do you think so?
I think you're right. The battleground is for those middle voters. It certainly is. And does this help Trump? We will see. Here's the thing that I wanted to point out, Joe, before we finish up the segment, is that I read a study from a Harvard professor who did the research on why Trump won in 2016. Trump carried the same Republican base in 2016 that was carried in 2012 and 2008 by McCain and those guys and Romney. Where Trump won the election was he polled better with Hispanics, African Americans, and other minority groups. And that was why he won in 2016. So if he can pull that contingent of voters back into his camp, and it doesn't even have to be over half, if he can pull 40 or 35% of those voters back into his camp, he has a real shot here, because those are voters that are in key areas in states where there are a lot of votes to be won. In Georgia, for example, in Pennsylvania, where he lost in the last election, in perhaps even in Arizona, where he lost in the last election. So whether he rightfully lost those elections or not is immaterial. If he can put enough votes in the ballot box that they can't steal the election from him, then yes, he's very electable, and he could win in November 5th. He could win.
Worst case scenario, he goes to jail. We see him in the orange jumpsuit. There's been a bill put forward in Congress to remove his Secret Service protection. And some are even characterizing that as like a sort of like a death sentence. If he's put into the big house with no protection in the general population, they're even using the term, he could be Epsteined here. Do you think that that's a likely outcome? I certainly don't, but what do you think?
I don't think it's an outcome. I think the Secret Service will be there. But, Don Trump Jr. broadcast right after the conviction, and I actually listened to him on Rumble. And Don Trump Jr. made the comment that this is chilling to him, because this is his dad he's talking about, right? And so if his dad gets murdered, this is a bad thing. And yes, I think it's concerning, but I don't think it's likely. But more importantly, to me, is what are the impacts on our nation? Have we truly become a banana republic where we can twist the law, make the law whatever we want to go after someone we don't like? And by the way, all the folks who are calling, wait till Biden gets it, if we do it to Biden, it's just as bad as what they did to Trump. It really is. And we need to be very careful here and make sure that we're in the right. And that's my big concern, Joe, is do we get him back by going after Biden? And then it becomes cycle after cycle of the bad guy being whoever the party is that's on the outside.
If his first 4 years will be anything like the next 4 years, should he be elected back to the White House, I can't imagine the DOJ cooperating with him enough to punish his detractors. Do you?
No, they're not going to cooperate with him. And it's we're finding out now that the military, the senior officers in the military were refusing to allow him to do what he was supposed to do as his job. They were hiding the truth from him, all those things. And so, yeah, Joe, I don't think the DOJ is going to cooperate. I think the FBI is going to be a whatever you want to call it. They're going to be an righteous opposition to Trump throughout his presidency. I don't see. Honestly, he's going to try to get things through. I don't think he's going to get let done as president. And I don't mean to be negative. I just think they're going to hamstring him.
Okay. The other thing I was going to ask you before we run out of time is, do you think Americans can even trust the legal system at this point? I know, again, it's not new that there's a manipulation or a twisting of the DOJ. That's happened many times in our country's history. But it feels like, especially looking at the polls, more and more Americans simply don't trust the system. So can we ever trust the system again is the question. What would it take to trust the system again? I'm not sure. I think that ship has sailed. What do you say?
I think it's long gone, Joe. I've been calling for criminal justice reform for at least 20 years. I think the bellwethers that we see in our communities, particularly in the black community, have been telling us for a long time that this is a problem. And I'm not opposed to locking up criminals. Please don't misunderstand me. But we have the largest prison population in the world. There's something wrong with the criminal justice system in that regard. And so we really need to look at it. So I think it's like the public schools. Can they be redeemed? Probably not. It would take a miracle. If Jesus comes back, absolutely. But other than that, I don't see it happening, brother. It's not going to happen.
What about the precedent? What about the precedent of, I don't think they proved that Donald Trump gave instructions to his bookkeeper to falsify those documents. If they paid an attorney, that's called an attorney fee. That's a legal fee. Whether or not that money was used to buy groceries, buy something off Amazon, or pay off Stormy Daniels is neither here nor there. You paid an attorney, it's a legal fee. That was sort of the argument. I don't think they proved Donald Trump knew or gave instructions to the bookie to change those records. So if the CEO is always going to go to jail for the crimes of staff members, let's just say, should the President of the United States go to jail for the crimes of CIA agents who execute people or torture them in foreign countries? You see what I'm saying, where I'm going with that? No. It seems like a dangerous precedent that once you open that up, you can't get it back in the bag after. So dangerous days ahead. I think a lot of people are thinking that.
One of the biggest questions I think out of this whole conviction thing is, why in the world would Donald Trump even go through this? Is any of this worth the trouble? I mean, he's 180 years potential prison time. He'll never see that, but that's not the point. He has lost net worth, but to the tune of potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. He's been impeached twice, investigated, raided. Think about the impact. Barron, his youngest son, got a front row seat to see the entire world lambast and eviscerate his father. What do you think that does to his psychology of a young man like that? Whether you like him or hate Donald Trump, what is the emotional and psychological impact on the family members? Why in the world does Donald Trump bother? If he had never even run for president, today, Sean Diddy Combs would still want to take pictures with the Don. Robert De Niro would still want to hang out with Donald Trump. All of the liberal left would still consider him the darling of the party. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton would still love him if he had never run for president. So why does he even bother? Is any of this worth at all? Is it his ego that he keeps going because it's so infamously huge? Or is it a true love for the country? Or is it something else? What do you say, Koeniger?
I think and I'm not a fan of the guy. You and I have talked privately about this. We've talked on the air about this. I'm not the biggest fan of the guy. But I do think he loves his country. And I'm not being funny. I think he truly does. I mentioned on the air, I listened to his son on Rumble commentating. And his son said the night before he announced his candidacy as a Republican candidate, that he was in the room with his dad and his family, and his dad said, tomorrow every one of my Democratic friends will turn their back on me. And he knew it before he announced they would all walk away from him. So I don't think he went into this blind. I don't know what it profits a man. What is he, 70? He was born on 47, right? 47, 48. What does it profit a man at his age to go into this and to your earlier point, which I was kind of chuckling in my head when you said it, how do you make a small fortune? You start with a large fortune and you whittle away at it. Donald Trump is one of those rare men who took his inheritance that his father left him and turned it into a huge fortune. And now he's turning it into a small fortune by dabbling in politics the way he has. But you know what, Joe? Despite all my criticisms of Donald Trump, if we get two more judges like he appointed to the bench, at least one more like he appointed to the bench, in the end, that counts, right? That has to be one of the reasons why we like him.
Did you like that video It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.